Hello and welcome to Crafting with Madam K. So tonight we're going to look at doing some burning with the stamps, doing like branding with my leather stamps. So I don't have the wood burner that the stamps attach to for the brands, and if I did, I wouldn't be able to use just these plain Tandy leather Craftsman stamps. So what I'm going to do is go through how I can use these regular stamps that cost just a couple bucks a piece and actually brand the design into the leather. So these are going to make really great keychains because they're just small, like 1-inch designs, and I can put them on a piece of leather and fold it into a keychain. I think it's going to end up looking really cool. So I practiced this for the first time last night, something that I had seen where you use a heat gun. So this is an actual construction heat gun, so it's a contractor grade. It goes up to 1,000 degrees. So I'm going to use that high setting for the 1,000 degree heat gun. And what you want to do, I tested it first, and I went through so many stamps. As you can see, I just kept trying it over and over again, and I couldn't figure out how to get it because these ones up here started to look okay. Like this one here, kind of branded okay, but it got the edges and it really like curled the leather. It started to really dry it out. Same with like this here. Even on a low heat, it dried out the leather and made it really stiff and really just kind of blurred the lines and when it burned the leather. So what I realized, and actually a friend of mine pointed out, is try using water. And it makes a lot of sense. When the leather is wet, the steam actually causes the burn. And rather than trying to brand it where the brand is so hot that just touching the leather sizzles it and it burns the design, use a lower heat and just hold it on there so it almost cooks it. Imagine a steak. It doesn't just immediately sear the second it touches the pan. It takes a little bit of time to cook that heat in. So by doing that, lower heat, low pressure, longer periods of time holding the hot metal on there, I was able to get this type of design and this type of design, which I'm really happy with. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the steps on how I got to that to show you how I went from all of these disgusting mistakes to finally this beautiful Thor's hammer stamp here. So before I get into the steps, I first of all want to thank a couple of my viewers, Eric and Max, for suggesting this video and said, you know, hey, have you done any leather branding? And I was like, well, you know, I thought about it before and I've heard some techniques, but I haven't gotten to try it out yet. So that gave me great inspiration for this next video. So thanks, guys. Hope you're watching. So first thing I'm going to do is set up my area. So I have this vise, which is what I'm going to use to hold the stamp because this is going to get incredibly hot. You're definitely not going to want to touch this at any point. Even when you're done stamping, it's still going to be very hot. So I have that to hold this in place. So I have pliers so that way when I take it off the vise, I can flip it upside down onto a scrap piece of leather and then pick it up by one of the prongs like this. That way I can set it on my leather where I need to set it. So the other thing I have, and this isn't necessary, but it does make things a lot easier, is one of the craftool presses, which works really well. I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on it. I'm just going to stamp it with the pressure, the weight of my arm, and it's going to probably apply about 35 to 40 pounds of pressure. So not enough to really stamp the leather, but enough to hold it in there nice and tight and give it a good seal and let the heat really sit into the leather and steam burn that. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, the other thing, I just got this, also not necessary, but a fun little gadget. This is a temperature thermometer, a laser temperature thermometer. So I'm going to show you how I figured it out last night to determine if your stamp is at the right temperature. But I don't recommend it because it'll burn you if you do it wrong. So this guy's going to come in handy, so we'll see what the right temperature actually ends up being. Okay, so got the stamp set up. I'm going to liberally wet the leather. I tried a lot of different ways with lots of water, a little bit of water, and I found that a really good amount of water is going to give you the best results. So I'm going to wet the leather and just sort of get that in place and get that ready. Now, I don't have the stamp attachment for this. The attachments are pretty expensive, and I find that they're not necessary. So I bought just the foot piece that I use on the stamps. It hooks right into the top of the stamp, and I used it for hammering, and it helps apply a lot of the pressure around the edges rather than just through the center. So I'm going to actually use that to put that right underneath, so when I'm applying the pressure, I'm applying it to the top of the foot piece. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to turn this baby on high. And it heats up almost immediately. You can see it's already red hot, so you don't really have to wait for it to get heated up. I'm going to hold it right on top of the stamp. Because the opening is about an inch and the stamp is about an inch, you don't have to move it around a whole lot. If I have a stamp that has a lot of detail on the edges, I will, but for the most part, I'm going to move it just right in the center and hold it there. And I'm only going to hold it there for about 15 seconds. I started off doing 30 seconds and it was way too long, so about 15 seconds should be good. Wasn't counting, but that feels like 15 seconds. So when you set this down, set it on a surface that will not burn, because this piece is going to get very hot. Now, my first technique was, if you touch the top, it's going to be very hot. If it's too hot to hold your finger there, but just enough to touch it about 3 times, and on that 3rd time your finger gets really, really hot, that's when you have about the right temperature. So that's where I'm at right now. So let's just see what that actually is. So you want to test the temperature from pretty close. So it says it's about 90 degrees. I'm not positive if that's correct. I feel like it should be a lot hotter than that, but either way, as long as it's calibrated, it doesn't matter what it says, as long as it gives me a reading each time. So like I said, I'm going to set it upside down so I can grab it and put it in where I need to put it. Lay it exactly where you need to put it. Carefully put your footer on top of it. Try not to let it move around too much because it may start burning right away. Move the leather to line it up. There we go. And just set that on there, and like I said, I'm just going to put my arm, I'm going to hold the back so it doesn't fall over, and just sort of put my arm on top and give it just a light amount of pressure and hold it there for about 60 seconds. And when I lift it up, if you burned it right, it won't come up right away. It's going to sort of be stuck into the leather. So if it comes up too easily, that's going to be your first note that it maybe didn't burn it deep enough. Every time I've noticed, it sticks really well. Okay, so my 60 seconds is almost up. One thing I do want to say, that if you put too much pressure on it, what's going to happen is it starts to indent into leather, which obviously happens when you're doing stamping, but the corners are very, very hot. So those corners are then going to touch your leather, and that could burn the leather too. So that's another reason why I'm not trying to put too much pressure, because I don't want the recessed part of the stamp to touch the leather and burn it, just the stamped part. Now, because the stamp is so hot, this piece is actually going to get hot too. It's pretty good now. But okay, so I cut the video because when I went to show you the outcome, it looked like that. So I thought maybe more water, and then it looked like that. So I thought maybe more heat, and then it looked like that. So it kept giving me this like gray look. Here was probably the best one, with a little more of an indent, but still very gray. And I realized, let me try using the same leather that I used yesterday. And I used the exact same technique on the same leather as yesterday, and I got that, which is a very, very nice design. So I think that, and it seems very obvious, the type of leather you use, the thickness of leather, the softness of the leather, all of that is going to play a part. So the best thing I can recommend is keep your heat low enough to where you can touch it, but you can't hold your finger on it. Keep the leather pretty moist, not soaked, and put a little bit of pressure, not enough to push down so much that the outside of your stamp touches the leather, and hold it there for about 60 seconds. After that, it's going to be a matter of testing depending on what type of leather you're using. This stamped really well. This is 6 to 7 ounce regular Craftsman tooling leather. It has like a pinkish, fleshy color to it. It's not very shiny, so this worked really, really well. Where this is the 4 to 5 ounce Craftsman oak, which has a very, very pale flush color to it, and that was giving me a gray burning rather than a dark brown burning design. So just grab a piece of scrap off of the leather that you're looking to try it on. Try that technique, modify it a little bit, see what you can do. It's definitely going to be trial and error depending, but once you figure out what works for that type of leather, take a note to yourself, write it down, that way you can repeat it every time. And thank you for joining in and crafting with Madam K. It may not be the right way, but it's the Madam K way. Be sure to check out my next video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks!